This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Tuesday, February 13th, 2018. And my guest is Alex Dobie of Android Central. Hi, Alex. How are you?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm doing okay. It's very early here. Alex is in Taiwan. I am in San Francisco. You do the math. One of us had to get up early, and we drew our, I don't know. We didn't draw anything, but I got the early moment, so it's 7 a.m., 7:30.
It's tricky when you have a 16-hour time difference. I just did the math. Yeah, it's rough. Yeah. However you
but look, I'm grateful you can make it because we've been talking about this, you and I, for a while. It seems that every time I invite you for the podcast, you are in Taiwan, and I know that's pretty common for you to be there. But it's funny because it's like, damn, I can't catch a break. I want to catch him when he's in the UK.
It's crazy, and actually, even when I'm in the UK, or when I'm in Europe, I'm off at events over there. So it's just been insane. I forget how many times we've actually tried and failed to make this happen. But it's good to be here. It's
good because I think we're gonna talk about a lot of good stuff. First of all, we got a bunch of newsy bits, but then I kind of want to pick your brain about the state of phonedom. Because you and I are kind of like, pretty on top of it. And then I think the other thing, because also just as an aside, last episode was mostly about the Tesla Model 3. So I think my audience is mad at me now. But I think the other thing too is we've got a, Mobile Congress coming up. So there's that to talk about.
Absolutely.
So anyway, let's get started. Let's pick a news topic. I don't know, essential. The whole essential thing. Units sold story. That's a little sad, right?
It is a little bit, and it depends whether you believe these well-researched but unofficial figures. Let's kind of just assume that we do for a moment. I mean, sad, not surprising, given everything that's gone on with that company, given the delays going into it, given all the issues with the software and the camera, given the cancelled UK launch. You've got to wonder at this point, what is the plan there?
The UK launch, wow.
I'm pretty sure I'll fact check myself now, but I'm pretty sure they did. They were supposed to be launching on EE, and I think that just never happened after it kind of tanked in the US.
So just to fill in the listeners a bit, IDC, right?
Yeah.
The analyst firm, kind of, basically issued a release or whatever. That's how analysts do it. I don't know what they do. The issues. It's not like PR, but it's kind of like PR.
I think this one was issued via tweet. I think.
Whoa, by a tweet, which is even more amusing. I think it was the head of IDC who did it, and they said that 88,000 units were sold by Essential in 2017. So that doesn't count, obviously, since then. But that's not a lot, if that's to be trusted, which, with IDC, it might actually be close, Those guys are pretty good.
Yeah. So kind of mini tangent real quick. We also had numbers around the pixels these past couple of days, and my spies tell me that is slightly below the actual number of pixel sales. So it may be, ballpark, it may be either side of it, but it's still kind of sad.
But even if you like bump this by 20%, 25%, you get, 115, 120,000 units, right?
Yeah, it's not a lot of phones. It's not much of a platform to build all like the other areas of that business that are supposed to be coming from that. It's you got to wonder, what is the plan from here, right? Are they going to do the same thing next year? The end game surely is to sell this to someone.
Well, Google would be the logical thing.
Would they though? They're selling way more pixels than Essential ever could. They have competing products.
But I think it's I agree. I'm just saying Google because that's kind of why a lot of people are aiming for. If you're if you make an Android, you're right actually, because Robin and XBit got acquired by Razer. That was a little unexpected. It could. What I'm saying is that what I meant Google is just because. I don't know, because Andy, he's going back to the roost or something. I don't know. That's what I was thinking. But you're right. It could be anyone as long as it's in the Android sphere, in the ecosystem somehow. So, Samsung, LG, anybody. But the point is, why? What do they have that's so special other than maybe Andy Rubin has a great team around?
Absolutely nothing. They have the brand value of Andy Rubin and not a whole lot else.
I mean, they have a great phone. I mean, arguably, it's cosmetically, design-wise, a great phone.
Cosmetically, a very nice phone. But here's the thing. that basically all like the uniqueness of that design is going to be completely lost this year. Everyone is going to do the notch design. Everyone is going to go bezel-less. Everyone is going to be 18:9. What is unique about the Essential phone, especially or even a second gen Essential phone 12 months later, if they just keep on that path?
Yeah.
There's very little that I see here to differentiate them in any way. And almost all the differentiators now are negative. It's all the stories around its failure at a commercial level, around the fact they can't get stable software out, about how they push back updates. It's not looking good.
No, and it's sad because, honestly, I wanted to root for them. I kind of still am. They're one of the underdogs, and they made such a gorgeous phone. We could go on about Essential, and I kind of have gone on about it on my podcast with others. But I think just to recap really quickly, I think it's a gorgeous phone with a lot of flaws around its release timing, around the camera performance, which even spec-wise has a lot of issues, kind of like the Z2 Force from Moto. Like anybody who launched a camera last year and dared not to put OIS on it was an idiot, in my opinion. There's no such thing in 2017, and I think we're going to see, unless some huge technological advancement happens that is unforeseen, we're going to see in 2018 every single flagship have either single or dual OIS on their camera system. To me, that was the biggest, most egregious thing, especially when you don't have the level of AI software that Google has, or even Huawei has, or even LG has, or even Samsung has in terms of imaging expertise. You need to give yourself the best hardware you can, and not stabilizing optically is just like, today is just a nightmare. So that was another thing that rubbed me the wrong way. And then, of course, all the bugs. I mean, Andrew has written extensively, Andrew Martonic at Android Central has written about this extensively, about the bugs, right? The stability issues around the product. For me, it hasn't been too unstable, but it's not my main phone. It's not my daily driver. So I don't know, There are some things that you don't see unless you use a phone day to day. And I'm talking about this, my thoughts on this phone are almost entirely based on what I've heard from my team. I don't have one here. I haven't used it as a daily driver, but just seeing everything that they've said, it's got some issues, it would seem. They pushed back the 8.0 update. Now it's going to be 8.1. And in the meantime, like as Andrew was pointing out, they still can't quite get the 7.1 release as stable as it needs to be. So we'll see where we go from here. We'll see where we go. I think it was a little too ambitious, and for its time, if it had launched when it was expected to launch, I think it would have been great. Right now, it's the other big reason that we love this phone collectively, we the tech media, is that it's cheap, right? But it's not.
It wasn't cheap to begin with.
But it's my point. It's not cheap. It's artificially cheap now. So we have to remember
it's cheap
that
because no one's buying it.
Yeah, it's only cheap because they're discounting and they're making a huge loss, I think, or at least a small loss.
The one silver lining with Essential potentially is that all of their problems seem to stem from one source, and that is software. The camera is bad. Okay, you can talk about OIS or whatever. You can at least get a decent camera with the hardware they have if your software is in check.
Yeah.
Stability all comes down to software.
But hey, you know what? We're adding auto HDR soon. I mean, it's rolling out right now. If you have an Essential, by the way, I'm being facetious, but I am on purpose because this is an expected feature these days. I mean, the Honor 7X, and by the way, I have this on good authority from somebody at Huawei that I talked to. Finally, one of the execs, and I had a phone call a while back because I was bitching a lot about imaging. And they said, what can we talk to you? Like, what is your beef? And I said, you don't have auto HDR on even something like the Mate 10 Pro. And I was corrected. Here's the deal. Auto HDR exists on all pretty much the latest, not the latest, but at least any firmware on the Mate 10 and Mate 10 Pro, any firmware on the 7X and View 10. It exists on pretty much any software upgrade to the Mate 9, P10, P10 Plus, way back. Basically, they don't tell you it's there, but it's on by default. And basically, you only have two modes on these phones. You have the auto mode, the default mode, which enables auto HDR, and then you have the force manual HDR mode that's in the settings that you can get to as a mode. So there is actually auto HDR on the Huawei phones. But that was it took a while for me to get them to admit that. And my my testing has confirmed that. I actually did some tests, and it definitely has auto HDR. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's based around like the same multi-frame goodness that Samsung does. And like you say, if you've used a Mate 10 Pro, if you point it at something with really, really challenging dynamic range, it's just kind of obvious that that's the way it works.
Yeah, it wasn't that obvious to me, to be honest. It's not quite as obvious as a Pixel, for example. And the fact that there wasn't
the Pixel is that next level.
The fact that there wasn't just a toggle like on the Pixel where you can turn it off, and there was an artificial mode called HDR, kind of didn't inspire confidence for me for a long time. So that's why I wanted to clarify that with them when I got my Mate 10 Pro, and I said, give me a call before I write anything about this phone, because I want to love it, and I do like it. But it's derailing. It's nice. We're derailing because I want to talk about that, because I do have a View 10 now, so we'll talk about that later. Anyway, essential camera issues, software issues, great design, lots of weight because of Andy, but not much else. It's kind of a sad story. I want them to succeed. I hope they can get right on the next phone, but you're gonna.
I just hope there is a next phone at this point.
How can they differentiate this time, right? Like even the 360 camera was a gimmick, and their implementation of I don't have it, but I've seen others have it. That fan that makes a noise that's always running. How plastically and crappy and cheap it feels compared to the phone. It's a disaster. Like, why even bother with that? You know,
that's the whole of the site. Yeah, that's the whole of the problem with their business, I guess. The phone exists as a gateway into all these other products, and thus, if the phone fails, then all the rest of this stuff fails.
Yeah, that's why I don't want them to fail, because I do think they have some potentially interesting technology coming up in that home automation field that they were showing us, and if they can be subsidized by some, Android's phone ecosystem to me is great because of variety, and honestly, the Essential did change the game in some ways. It showed people, hey, look, you can make a phone that is easy to hold in your hand, feels good in your hand, is made of incredible materials, has a really small form factor for a really large screen. We knew all this intuitively, Samsung Galaxy S8, iPhone 10. But remember that when the Essential was announced, I think maybe the Galaxy S8 was out, but I definitely don't think the iPhone 10 was out. So it was exciting at the time. And I think it's the future. I honestly feel that even though I love my Pixel 2 XL and I love all these other phones that I use that have large screens, I still feel that the form factor of the base S8 and probably the upcoming S9, which, by the way, you wrote a really great story about the S9 minus, as you called it. And I'll put a link. That phone and then the iPhone 10, they're honestly the best form factor. Like, of any phone I've ever used. Like, they're perfect.
Yeah, and you would hope, even if the S9 does go the way that we're expecting, with being various feature compromises for the smaller size, that this isn't just the end of that smaller form factor also being premium, right? You would hope that the smaller Pixel, maybe next year with a redesign, kind of fills that territory as well. Again, anything could happen in the next 10 months. We'll just have to see. We'll surely be in for some surprises, I think.
So speaking of cameras, let's segue into I don't know if they're rumors or if they've been confirmed. You're more on top of the news than I am, really. But the V30s from LG supposedly going to get announced at MWC, and it's basically a V30 with better software. Why not just roll out a software update, folks?
Well, I think that, yeah, good question. I mean, I think they are at some point.
Unless that
you have the Oreo update going out with. I mean, here's the thing: unless they actually change the internal hardware, so it's
I'm thinking unless they put an 845, that's the only thing I can think of.
They might do. I'm not sure.
Because
LG
they don't have a G7. Remember, right? Like they have a dilemma right now. Doesn't look like they're gonna have a flagship in time to compete with the big boys, the other big boys, which is really only Samsung at this point. So what do you do, right? Take a really well-received, well-liked package, update the chip to 845, and then, with that you get a whole bunch more oomph in terms of, potential AI processing, and put a camera AI features. Boom, done.
Yeah, maybe. It depends on how much of a true upgrade this is going to be, and how, as opposed to just a stopgap release. I could see them going one or two ways. I could see them having, keeping the core of the V30 basically unchanged, and the differences maybe come in terms of your vanity specs, like RAM, internal storage, design features. We already had like the Signature Edition, I think, that launched in Korea that had some crazy design.
There's a V30 Plus too, right?
The V30 Plus is just the 128 gig version.
Yeah, right. It's vanity.
Yeah, it's vanity. So you have that, and they could continue in that sort of level by just saying, okay, here's updated software. They'll probably make some non-committal reference to, okay, the old software is coming to the new software is coming to the older V30. Maybe that would happen. And then, for the next 3 months or so, it would be exclusive to this new model. That would be kind of weird. Or they could go the other route. They could have an 845. They could give meaningful upgrades there. They could arguably address one of the things that actually maybe needed to be changed in this phone. So perhaps something to do with the screen. Maybe some of their fancy new OLED is ready now. Maybe they're not using the same stuff as last year.
That would be nice.
That would be very nice. And of course, a few other possibilities. We're looking at camera upgrades. Right now, they're just talking about AI. But another possibility maybe is, LG moving towards bigger pixels with them, addressing probably something that was the biggest downside of that camera, which was low light performance compared to some of the stuff that came later in the year. Still pretty good in low light.
I was really impressed. I mean, I took the V30 on some like concerts, and I was able to get. And even zoomed in low light, that camera, like for the size of the pixels, I was blown away. Let's put it that way. That's the thing.
Like contextually, it's good because we know like how that sensor works and stuff. But I think like if this is their thing that's going to go up against the Galaxy S9, it's going to go up against all these other phones which will have more advanced optics. Mm-hmm. They need to kind of up their game in low light, and maybe they can just do that with some kind of crazy computational magic on the SoC. Maybe that's enough. But
we'll see. I mean,
we've all seen what the ported Google camera can do on other phones. So if they're
speaking of, if you do have an Essential and you want a better camera experience right now, download that Google Pixel camera that you can get off of XDA forums, and other places. But you're right. I think though that, I think that the reason LG picked such small sensors for the V30, small pixel sensors, is because they wanted it to be thin, one, and they also have way more expertise in optimizing small pixel sensors historically than they have optimizing large pixel sensors. If you look at their history, the G4, for example, which to me is to this day still the low light champ. I mean, the Pixel, of course, does it computationally. But if you look at what came out of the G4 when it was released, in low light, it really easily competes with the Pixel 2 XL. And you look at the pixel size and you're like, how is it even possible? And I think that's not AI based, but traditional image processing that LG has real chops in. So they said, we want to make it thin, and we'd only have these sensors that have small pixels, and we know how to do that right. So let's stick with what we know. But you're right. I think they need to crank it up a notch. So the V30 kind of like just kept up last year, right? Whereas you need to be able to be out there this year, right?
You do, and I think it's sort of to a lesser extent, it ran into the same problem the G6 had. It just got steamrolled by everything else. It was this interesting phone for a while, but they left it too long between announcement and launch, and then everyone forgot about it, and then we had Pixels and Note 8s and iPhone 10s, and it was just like, well, who still cares about the V30?
Audiophiles like me.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing no one else is doing still. That's hi-fi DAC.
That phone sounds still. I mean, I try to convince myself that the other phones, especially the USB-C based ones that you can try different dongles, right? The Razer dongle is the best one right now.
See, I found the Razer dongle doesn't work in some phones.
Well, it doesn't work in some phones.
Some combinations.
You're right. Yeah. You're right. But I mean, if you can get it to work, it's the best one. The second best one is the Essential phone dongle.
Okay.
And then the if you want a good baseline average that works okay with everything, the Pixel dongle, the Pixel 2.
You know what's absolute garbage?
The U11 dongle. The worst.
Oh, really? I was going to say the Mate 10 dongle.
Oh, the Mate 10 dongle. Yeah, I haven't actually listened to it, but I'm sure it's absolute garbage. Yeah.
It's pretty bad, yeah.
You know, what's interesting, here's an interesting little...
We need to start a new site just reviewing dongles.
You should. Seriously, if you have somebody on your team that is into audio, you can hire me to do if you want, Alex.
Dongle editor?
Yeah. No, just, I'm not talking about a full, like just as a 1 gig story thing. Here's the thing, though. The speaking of dongles... and speaking of Huawei, sorry, about the Mate 10, the 7X, the Honor 7X, $200 phone with a headphone jack. The audio coming out of that headphone jack is like surprisingly good. Like it is, to me, well within my acceptable standards with my usual headphones and earbuds. And it's a $200 phone. Yet you have the Mate 10 Pro, which is arguably a far better phone, yet out of the box, the audio out of the headphone adapter is worse. So that's the problem we're having today with these things, folks. And I know you're going to say, well, Miriam, everybody listens with wireless headphones and you're an audiophile and la, la, la. And I'm like, no, you do not understand. This is a basic requirement, which is why I'm super excited. Another rumor, which I didn't link to yet in the notes, but you know this rumor, is that there'll be a headphone jack on the Galaxy S9. Woohoo!
Yeah, and that's kind of like expected, right? I mean, they've been very sort of keen to establish their own little sort of niche with going against the grain. I mean, back in the day, they were considered the Apple copycat, whatever. We're well past that now. But now they have this sort of their own sort of area where it's like, okay, we still have movable storage. We still have the headphone jack. We don't have a notch at the top of the screen. It's just kind of with this sort of TikTok release cycle, I'm not too surprised to see that, but it's still good. And I guess in this day and age, it's not something we should necessarily take for granted. So
I just don't trust.
Good job, Samsung.
I just don't trust Samsung long term, though. Like, the thing about Samsung is they'll change their mind on a dime. They'll just pivot instantly if they have to. Remember how they removed the storage from the Galaxy S6 and the waterproofing, and then they put it back on the Galaxy S7.
Yeah, maybe.
They did it because of because of complaint. I think they reacted to the, honestly, here's the thing. I think the waterproofing is a little harsh because they went from a shitty plastic design to really high premium Apple grade design from the S5 to the S6.
And look, the waterproofing in the S5 wasn't so great.
Exactly. And not only that, but I don't think they could pull off the IP rating for the S6 because they didn't really know how to do it right yet. Then they perfected it, and they did with the S7. And I think, honestly, the storage, the onboard storage was one of those, like, nobody's going to need this. And then everybody complained. And then
I think
put it back.
It also was kind of another like reaction to the fact that at the time they were selling an S6 with 32, 64 and 128. And then they got to selling them in carrier stores and realized actually everyone just buys the 32. So it's easy just to make one SKU and then give everyone the option of removable storage.
That's a good point.
It's way less of a headache as a manufacturer to do that.
That is a very good point, Alex. Yeah. So anyway, V30s, we'll find out. We'll be there. I'll be there. You'll be there. Everybody will be there.
I want it to be good. I'm still relatively enthusiastic about LG. I know they've lost money for 10 quarters now.
But they make money on TVs and washing machines, so don't worry. They'll be okay.
They just need to sell a bunch of toasters. Keep the.
I mean, I have an LG washer and dryer at my place in Portland. I love it. It's just amazing. And I don't have an LG TV, but I've seen several, and oh my goodness, those OLED TVs are juicy and delicious. That wallpaper TV, have you seen that in person?
I have not seen that in person. I didn't really get around to looking at many TVs at CES. That came
out last year, and there's a few high profile folks that we know. And I haven't seen it. I only saw it at CES, but I know a few high profile folks that got review units like Marquez, MKBHD, and of course Lewis at Unbox Therapy and a few others. So it's amazing. It's so thin and it's so gorgeous. It makes everything else look like just potatoes. I don't know what that means. I just made that up. That was terrible. Okay, so. What else do we have on the topics? We do have the whole discussion around. Let's see. I think that Android P discussion, supposed rumors of Android P having software functionality built in to support various notches on displays. Let's rewind that and high level that a bit. What is your how do you feel about this notching business?
I'm kind of ambivalent, really. I mean, it's going to happen. There are going to be a bunch of Android phones this year with notches. That's just the way things go. I've used enough phones to know that I can get used to pretty much anything in a phone that I'm using day to day. So I'm sure if I had if I was using an iPhone 10, I would get used to it, like many people have. So at one level, it's like, well, this is happening anyway. So Google as a platform holder kind of needs to just cater to market trends and say, the stuff that apps need to know if a phone has a notch, like it needs to know where to render stuff, basically. It needs to know where the notch is, what kind of notch it is, and what, if an app supports it, what stuff it can put on the screen. So that just makes sense from that perspective. What that also tells me, though, is that if Google is doing this, then I tweeted this out the other day, that if the Pixel line is pretty much succeeding the Nexus line as being the reference device for Android. So the Pixel 2 XL was the first, Google sanctioned 18:9 screen that did 18:9 support the proper Google way. So that was your reference device. If this is going to be an Android P, that kind of tells me that probably one of the new Pixels later this year is going to have a notch.
Could be, yeah.
That would very much line up with the other side of this rumor, which is that Google is bringing in a redesign to Android to trying to make more iPhone users.
I want gestures. To me, I'm not an iPhone fan. I love the Mac. I'm an Apple fan, but not an iPhone fan, not an iOS fan. I bought an iPhone 10 because I think it's a significant, device in the history of phones and the history of Apple. And I do feel it's a phenomenal phone overall. But what really surprised me and really kind of felt so intuitive and so natural and so awesome to me was the gesture-based home button. The fact that you can swipe at the bottom, left and right, to change to swap between apps, and you can kind of go back to the home screen by swiping up a little bit. The only thing I don't like about it, and gesture-wise, is that gone is the dismiss the cards by swiping them, which I think needs to come back somehow, because that was the best thing ever. I know Apple doesn't want you to swipe away the app. They don't want you to kill the apps because they don't believe you should be managing that. And if I see all the iPhone users that I know that have an iPhone non-10, they swipe all the time. They kill all their apps all the time. They're like addicted to killing their apps some weird way. And we know it makes no difference. So Apple doesn't want you to do it. So I think that's why they removed the easy swipe. But I like that. It was good. It's a Palm Pre had it.
Sometimes you just need to kill apps.
Yeah, sometimes you need to kill apps. But they still make it possible. It's just not as easy, right? So I think that they wanted it to make it less easy, I think, because they see people doing it and it's not necessary. But on Android, it'd be great. So I want to see gestures. I want to see Android P support gestures out of the box. I
know a lot of people like you who love the gestures. I'm just not sure how that would fit, unless they completely change Android's navigation paradigm. You can do home easily enough. You can do task switching easily enough.
It works.
But how do you do the built-in back function? That's a part of Android that's been there since the very beginning that would just be impossible with the current setup unless you add some kind of janky diagonal.
Yeah, you're right. That would definitely be challenging.
Something else that maybe could replace it, and this is something that Samsung has been slowly creeping towards. Eventually, we're going to have more pressure sensitive screens. That's just the way things are going to go. Samsung's been working towards it. You already have the thing on Samsung phones where you can completely get rid of the on-screen keys and just hard press the middle for home. If you have an entire screen that supports that pressure sensitivity, then basically you don't ever need to see those on-screen keys, except maybe if you're in the launcher. So I think that...
Go on.
I think a more googly way to do that might be to say, okay, you just have these three areas that you know where they are on the screen. You don't necessarily see them, but it's okay, middle is home, right is task switching, left is back, and you just know where to hard press, and that's just where it is, where it lives. And you still get to use the entire screen. So
yeah, I think the biggest challenge is going to be to see how they can pull it off with the back button. You're right. I didn't think of that, but that is a thing that I don't want to go away. I don't like the fact that on iOS apps, you never have a consistent location for the back button. Drives me nuts. The other thing is that I'm thinking that it might be more than notches. That the other thing you have to keep in mind is having supporting notches in the OS in some clever way also means you could support displays that are not rectangular. You could support displays that cut the corners more than today, or are you potentially even completely circular? And, maybe that's out there. Maybe that's the next version of Android beyond that. But I kind of want to see that because we need interesting form factors. And that's the biggest challenge right now. Phones are boring.
Exactly, yeah. Maybe that's what's going to make phones interesting again. Another kind of footnote in this article was supposedly better support, like you're saying, for regular screen sizes, but potentially phones with multiple screens as well. Or
folding screens, because there might be an area that... there might be a notch in the area that it folds, like not fully, like if Samsung does a real folding screen, which is the rumor for the Galaxy X, Galaxy 10.
I think they've actually said that they're going to do that this year. Like someone at Samsung has actually gone on the record as saying that's happening this year.
But whatever they do, it's possible that, maybe the bottom edges of the fold might have some indent there or something for some physical reason. So the point is, I think this is exciting and not surprising that the P would support notches, and I'm all for it. I'm like you. We review enough phones that we can adapt, and I'm not too worried about notches. On the Essential, I certainly don't notice it and don't feel it. On the iPhone 10, it's a little more obvious, and it only gets in my way when I'm watching full screen videos or looking at photos. And then it bugs me a little bit, but it's easy to force the phone to cut to letterbox basically a little bit. And yes, you lose a bit of screen real estate, but honestly, I'd rather letterbox when I'm looking at video and photo content. I'd rather letterbox and have the notch. For the rest, though, for just navigating the UI and using an app normally, in portrait mode, it doesn't seem to matter too much. In landscape, it's a bit weird, right?
Yeah, for sure. One last thing on this Android P rumor. So I kind of touched on it before. The idea that Google is going to kind of redesign Android as a whole, and that's supposedly going to make it appeal to iPhone users. A lot of people kind of reacted to that with horror, saying that it's going to become more like iOS, that we're going to have like pastel colors and all. They're going to
get rid of the back button, Alex. They're going to get rid of it. Sorry.
Maybe. But actually, to me, that's kind of interesting because like, how do you define the look of Android anymore? It's been so long since there's actually been a phone released by Google with just purely stock Android. The look of Android now on Google's phones is the Pixel UI, and that changes year by year anyway. So my question is, okay, is this a redesign of Android, or is this a redesign of Google's Android on the Pixel? Is this just yet another Pixel UI change, which we would be expecting year to year anyway? Or is it something more fundamental that will affect every Android phone in 2019 and beyond? Will be interesting to see what happens.
I'm honestly I really don't think we need that right now. I hate to say that, but we're in a place where Android, other than the potential gestures, is in a good place, user experience-wise. It's probably in the best place it's ever been. As an aside, since you just mentioned the Pixel launcher, Google Now launcher is gone officially from the App Store now. Just FYI.
Okay, did that finally happen?
I tried to install it on the View 10. Nope. So I got the APK from APK Mirror because I just kind of like that launcher. But here's the vexing part. They have the Pixel launcher in the App Store, right? The original Pixel launcher, but you can't install anything but a Pixel. And this is, to me, the biggest problem right now with the Android launcher situation. Google's put a lot of its great apps in the App Store. There's the calendar, there's the clock, there's contacts. Like, I personally skin a lot of my phones to be almost like my Nexus/Pixel devices. And yet we can't, unless you go to a hack, you can't get an official launcher from Google that looks like at least the Pixel, or maybe even better, the Pixel 2. Like, why don't they just give it away? You take out some functionality. I understand you're gonna get the Play Now, whatever it's called, the music detection feature or whatever. I get all that. Yeah. Just give us the Redux. For those of us who happen to have a Pixel 2 or Pixel 2 XL that breaks and have to go down to a Moto E4 for a few weeks, come on, please.
Yeah, I think this is a consequence of there basically being two Googles right now. So you have the Google is a platform holder of Android, which I guess you could think of as being like the Google Now launcher Google that maintains all the Google Suite apps like Gmail, everything else. Then you have Google, the hardware vendor, Google, the Pixel manufacturer that has all of its own stuff that lives on the Pixel. And I think it's the Pixel launcher, right? So I would think of, even though it appears in the same umbrella in the Play Store, which makes it confusing, I would think of it as Google would be wearing its device manufacturer hat when it was making that launcher. So it would just be a case of that being the launcher, that it's just the most convenient place for it to be updated and for it to live on the Play Store. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they would ever have any intention of bringing that to other phones. Which is a shame, because it's a nice launcher, but that's just the way
true. I mean,
things
you can get it on XDA. There's I'm sure somewhere, or on APK Mirror or whatever. Wherever I got the Google Now launcher off of APK Mirror. That was fine. You bring up something interesting. You said that Google has there's two Google. I'd say there's like 20 Googles. And like it's a very schizophrenic company. Even in the hardware division, Nest is a separate thing that kind of got rolled back in and just recently, and one of the founders of Nest that was left, I can't remember his name, left. And I mean, it's just weird. Google is just like, I think Medusa is the best analogy to Google. It's like some kind of beast with like serpents on its head. And I mean, I love them, don't get me wrong. Like, it's just, they've always been schizophrenic as a company, though. Always.
Exactly. And actually, this gets to something, I have a video coming up soon, probably will be out by the time this podcast goes up, around Google Now and what happened with that. And I think you may have even been there at I.O. in 2012 when it was first announced.
Yeah,
it seemed
I
like
was.
This magical thing. And from there, we kind of reached the sort of glory days of Google Now, when we had the Google Now launcher, and it was like, wow, we have Google Now as part of your home screen. You had cards for everything. And it was this magical predictive thing that was suddenly bringing in and making use of all this information that was in your Google account. Kind of creepy, maybe a little bit, but also super exciting, very, very useful. And from there, with almost like the move into Marshmallow and this sort of misadventure into Now on Tap that eventually turned into Google Assistant. And now if you swipe right on the Pixel home screen, what you basically have is the weather, which is duplicative because that's on the main home screen anyway, and a really, really crappy news aggregator.
True. It's weird. It's, again, the multiple personalities. So I completely forgot this topic. I'm throwing it in there, Alex. Just hang tight. But this really reminds me of another thing that happened this week that I didn't discuss on the last podcast. It might have happened last week. I can't remember. Is the rumors of Google potentially, improving their Messenger app, which is the Messages app they have, which is their pure text messaging app, which, by the way, I put on all my phones because I love it. Because it's just the most basic text messaging app. No frills, no weirdness, no weird, this is going over IP versus over, traditional SMS channels, blah, blah, blah. And there's rumors that they're finally going to take iMessage head on for the nth time and do it right using carrier support. Whatever that technology is that carriers that's been developed.
LCS, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there's that. We had that story, that rumor, and that would be their way of taking on iMessage until, of course, Apple makes iMessages available on Android, which I could just see happening. It'd be hilarious, right? Imagine Google makes this happen, universal support. It works on all Android phones. We're a year down the road and everybody seems to be pretty happy, but it still hasn't really been adopted beyond Android. And all of a sudden, Apple drops iMessages for Android and then game over, right? Because everybody's going to switch over to that.
Man, maybe...
I hate it. My positioning,
of
Alex, is that I hate iMessage. And I don't hate iMessage because of the snobbiness of Apple and the fact that Apple users use. It's the implementation. As a software engineer, the way they did this is a freaking nightmare. It is unreliable. It's bad. It's poorly implemented. It's poor for carriers. It's poor for users. It's only good for one person, and that's Apple. And even they have way too much maintenance around it in terms of customer support issues. And it's a freaking nightmare. And they're stuck with it now because people love it, right? But I hate it. I really hate it.
Well, people in the US love it. I mean, it's less of a thing in Europe. It's still used, but I feel like that whole ecosystem lock-in and peer pressure kind of thing is much more of an American thing than it is a European thing, because WhatsApp and Messenger are just
WhatsApp
far
is
more widely
pretty awesome,
used in Europe
honestly. I mean, I personally think, look, here's the way I see this, and I don't understand why people can't wrap their heads around this. If you want an alternative to text messaging where you want to see return receipts and figure out that somebody's replying right now, you just install WhatsApp and you're done. Like, what's the
For
big
sure,
deal?
yeah.
You have two choices. You can stop using SMS completely if they have WhatsApp. Like, you're done. It's just going to go over IP. Like, what's the big deal? Like, can't people wrap their heads around that? Why does it have to be integrated? It doesn't.
Yeah. It's still something you have to download, and that means that it depends on it gaining traction in different ways in different markets, and that's why you have like, Europe and Asia. Well, probably more Europe than Asia, but Europe in particular is very much WhatsApp territory, and then you have all these other local apps. That
WeChat is Asia territory, right?
Yeah, WeChat,
and then of course,
more China.
There's also KokoTalk, and there's in Korea, and there is Line in Japan, and in other parts, right? Line is popular in some other parts of Asia.
Yeah, Line is big in Korea and Taiwan as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's messaging is a mess.
It's always been a mess. But you know what? Here's the thing. If you rewind, and this is where I'm putting my grandma hat on, okay, you guys, come back with me to the dawn of time, children. When Instant Messenger became a thing, before it was even called Instant Messenger. So in the early days of Unix, it essentially became Linux and became Android and became iOS and became macOS before that, or OS 10. All these Linuxes back then, there was this thing called Talk. You could type Talk at the command line, put the IP address of the other person, and boom, you would talk to them. It was instant messaging, but one-on-one, and very clumsy interface. And then they came out with, there was one called Chat, which is better. And then they did IRC. And IRC is still the foundation for a lot of things like Slack. I mean, IRC is a solid. It's an actual internet standard baked in, like FTP, HTTP, etc. And then we got ICQ, which was, when the web became a thing and PCs were going online and Macs were also going online to a lesser extent because Macs weren't very popular then. In the late 90s, we got ICQ, and then we got AOL Messenger, and then we got Windows Messenger, which was called something else and renamed itself a million times.
It's MSN Messenger,
MSN Messenger.
Live
we got Skype. I mean, like this is not this messaging problem with text just kind of got pulled in there by accident somewhere along the way and became collateral damage. And when I mean text, I mean SMS, the standard. I think you guys, listeners, and you, Alex, obviously know this, but you know that 99% of the people, if you talk to them on the street, have no idea that text messaging is a completely different technology on the phone than, using like, I don't know, Facebook Messenger or whatever. It's not IP based. It's part of, kind of subcarrier data that's part of the voice stuff. It's legacy technology. It really ideally needs to be erased. And I think that's kind of what hopefully Google can do with that technology, which I'm forgetting again. What is it?
RCS?
RCS,
is the name.
Yes. The idea is that, for legacy purpose, like that all the phones communicate via IP, via data for the messaging. And at the server level, at the carrier level, it looks at it and goes, oh, it's going to Miriam. And Miriam is using a dumb phone that's like 3 years old and does not have that technology. We send it to her as a text message using legacy tech. But at the phone level, you don't really have to worry about it. Whether you have and it's auto switching. The moment you put your SIM in another phone, they realize, oh, this phone doesn't support the IP stuff. We send it to them as SMS. You see what I'm saying? And that's what Apple should have done, but they never did it. And it's a total disaster because of that.
I just hope that what this implementation works as well as they said. This is something which has not really been proved yet.
Oh, for sure.
We look at all the issues. I mean, okay, iOS, iMessage is a completely different beast. But if we look at all the issues in the early days of people trying to disable it and not being able to, and undelivered messages, there is the potential makings of like a royal shitstorm if this doesn't work between all the different carriers and all the different countries. Hopefully it's a standard. Hopefully it will, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, that's exactly why the carriers need to be involved, for better or for worse, is because they can determine this text is going to Croatia, to this subscriber. They do not support the IP stuff, the auto trans. I'm going to turn it into an SMS and send it to them. You know what I'm saying? That is carrier negotiated. And that's the beauty of the system, is that it's not a server at Apple that does the negotiating and cannot sync properly with the servers of the of the carrier, and then there is a discrepancy, which is the biggest problem. That's why you have to disable iMessage, and it's so difficult to disable iMessage on your phone before you have to log out of every account, and like it's just ridiculous, right? And yes, it's a lock-in for Apple. But honestly, look, I know the folks at Apple. I know the engineers who work there. I know some of them. They're not into lock-in. They don't want to make it they didn't want to make iMessage as crappy as it is in terms of technology. It just happened that they had a few issues in there, and they stayed baked in because the thing just took off.
Yeah, like it's a big ship to steer, and when you have that many users on board and reliability needs to be 100%, then it's tough.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. I hate it with all my passion, just as much as I hate the lack of headphone jacks, and it's just going to be the subject of many Miriam rants. I'm telling you now. Okay, so speaking of carriers and stupid things, I'll let you take that one on, Alex.
Okay, well, this is kind of a little bit out of my usual area, but
me too,
Verizon is gonna start locking its phones, even though they should probably be sold as unlocked, because
they are currently sold as unlocked. It's the only carrier in the US who actually sells their phones unlocked, which is magical and revolutionary in the US. And now
required by law, right? That is a legal point.
Yes, they're required to unlock them once if you own your phone outright, like you buy a phone from T-Mobile or AT&T or a carrier, and you pay for it completely, or your payment plan is over, they're supposed to unlock it for you. Yes,
right.
And they do, but it's not really, it's not like in Europe where you have to sell them unlocked regardless. Like I think in Europe you can't actually even lease or payment plan a phone that's locked, right?
Can
you?
I think it varies from country to country, but yes, you can.
Okay.
We have carrier locked phones over here. The difference in the Android world is that the SKUs are basically the same, so it's not like there are physical hardware differences that would stop you from unlocking.
Right, but the bottom line is with Verizon, they were one of the few, and the reason for, and this is why I'm thinking there's more going on here. There's some political weirdness going on. They are one of the few unlocked their phones because Verizon's LT bands, the 700 megahertz bands, are the way they got that spectrum from the FCC in the US was they had to agree to open it to any device. That was one of the requirements for that license. So They had to allow devices from other manufacturers, other carriers on that network. That was one of the requirements. They're the only ones that have that requirement on their LTE spectrum for whatever reason. And so I'm simplifying, but that's basically it. So they decided, hey, and I think one of the clauses in there is that they have to sell their devices unlocked as well so that they can work on other carriers. And they did that. And now they're rescinding that. With lots of caveats, and I'll let you get into the details if you've read the story. If not, I will. But the thing is that I think that they might be legally shooting themselves in the foot here, or at least trying to put pressure on the law here and see if they'll get some consequences from it, because I don't think they're technically allowed to do what they're doing because of this spectrum allocation.
I think they could potentially be taking advantage of what they maybe view as a friendly FCC to them to be able to see how far they can push it. The nuts and bolts of this is the fact that ostensibly to prevent theft of unlocked devices from their stores, you'll first need to activate it with a Verizon SIM, and then there'll be some undetermined waiting period, after which you will be able to unlock anywhere between a couple of weeks and a couple of months. Who knows?
I mean, basically, right now, you can go on eBay and buy perfectly new in the box. And I'm not saying that they were stolen, okay? Let's just assume for a second that everything is legit. There are people who buy, especially distributors, who buy bulk stock of Verizon phones and resell them on eBay. And you can buy a phone that you can't get anywhere else. They have these kind of slightly customized versions. For better or for worse, why would you do that? I don't know, because they're full of bloatware and they have stupid Verizon logos on them. But hey, if you want it, great. So you can buy these phones, and right now you can put an AT&T and a T-Mobile SIM, and they work fine. It won't work with Sprint because Sprint has special requirements with their CDMA and their weird LTE bands and stuff. But that's today. And so I think, honestly, theft is kind of like the excuse they're giving out in PR. But I think it's more about these resellers And
I mean, if only phones had some kind of unique identifier that you could then block from accessing.
Yeah, they do,
right?
don't they? Huh? Jesus. Seriously, I mean, Verizon. What the F? Anyway, so that's just the story that Alex and I saw, and we just wanted to rant about it for a few minutes. On that note, speaking of rants and raves, I want you to hear your thoughts on the Honor View 10. Huawei Honor View 10 or Honor View 10?
I think it's just the Honor View 10 these days.
I know, it's a can of worms because to me they're all Huawei phones. I'm sorry, folks. I don't see a distinction. I don't understand the sub-brand thing. I never have. You tried to explain it to me, but it didn't make any sense, Alex. La la la. I do not want to hear this explanation. Maybe we should talk about this a little bit. I mean, seriously, like I love Huawei, okay? Like they make some really beautiful devices and they're SOL in North America right now with what happened recently with the FCC and the AT&T and the Verizon, the stupid government we have. But they make great phones. And the Honor line has always been interesting. I think the 7X is by far the best phone for under $200 today, at least in the US. I don't know about anyone else.
I'm even struggling to think of anything else that I'd recommend. You'd be looking at like a year-old Motorola phone at that price point. Yeah,
every time I use it, unless I play games or something, I'm like, I don't think I need a OnePlus 5T. This is perfectly fine. Thank you very much. I'll take it. And so the View 10 is kind of cranks it up a notch. It's kind of like a Mate 10 Redux, right? Basically.
A little bit, yeah, and the core platform it's based around is the same. The specs are the same. What you get with the View 10 is a bit more cutting of corners and things like. Although, actually, arguably, you have a headphone jack, so it's like that's a
and you don't have and you don't have IP. You don't have IP.
You don't, yeah.
Support, and you do have SD card, right? Support. So it's very much like the Mate 10 Non-Pro.
A little bit. It's almost like the priorities are rejigged a little bit. So you have a bit more of a sturdy body. You don't have the glass on the back that.
That's the only thing that makes it feel cheap to me, honestly. And in a way, the OnePlus 5T kind of feels cheap to me because it doesn't have glass in the back. I'm so used to it now. The glass sandwich. I mean,
have you used the Sandstone one?
No, they didn't have one for me. I guess I'm not important enough. I got the red one, but I never got the white Sandstone one. I hear it's gorgeous, but it's painted, and I don't like painted phones. It's a painted finish.
It's nice. It picks up denim dye really easy, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, it picks up. I'm sure it picks up if you do a lot of mechanical work. Like I like to go digging into my cars. I'm sure that touching the phone, even after you washed your hands, is going to stain it with oils and stuff. It's not good.
Hazardous.
Hazardous. Yeah. Look, the reality is the View 10. I did a hands-on with it back in November, I think it was, and I finally have one to play with. It's a European model. It kind of got it in a roundabout way, but it's a real phone. It's official. Blah blah blah. I haven't unboxed it yet or whatever on video because I probably won't because I'm using it right now. But the point is, I somehow didn't get around to it. It's interesting because it's like a Mate 10 Redux, but it does feel cheaper because it feels like there's very little this difference between it and the 7X because it's all metal back. The difference is the fingerprint readers in the front, in the tiny little sliver below the screen because it's an 18:9 display. And then the back, the 7X has the fingerprint reader on the back because it has an 18:9 display.
And I think on the back of the View 10, you have arguably the ugliest dual camera setup.
Yeah, it's even uglier than the 7X, which is pretty ugly to start with. But honestly, this is the thing. I love the shape of these phones I like phones with flat backs. I know a lot of people don't because it fits better in hand, but I like phones with flat backs. And I like the fact that both these phones have flat backs. But honestly, like I could totally live with metal on a 7X. Like $200, I'm not arguing. This is an amazing phone for $200. But at $500, which is roughly, we don't know exactly the price point yet of the View 10 in the US, but that's supposedly the price point is going to be like competing is OnePlus. I feel that, like you look at the Honor 8 back in the day, and I don't know, we've never had the Honor 9 in the US. Does the Honor 9 have a glass back?
The Honor 9 has the exact same finish, right down to the fact that it likes to sort of hockey puck its way off flat surfaces.
Yeah, like the OnePlus X. Remember that? The most slippery phone in the entire history of phones. I've been gathering all my phones and sending them back, and I couldn't find my OnePlus X's because they had like slipped somewhere in the nether regions of my office. No, I'm joking, but they were super slippery. But anyway, back on track. The Honor 8 and I guess the Honor 9, to me felt really premium. They really felt like Redux versions of their Huawei equivalent flagships. But, the View 10 certainly has the specs to be a Mate 10 Redux, but doesn't feel in hand like a Mate 10 Redux. I actually find it feels cheaper than the 7X in some weird way. Probably because
you have the join, don't you, around you have like metal joining into metal weirdly, whereas I think in the 7X it's more like just a clean.
Yeah, it's cleaner. Piece. And also, honestly, frankly, I don't like front fingerprint readers. I don't really care what people say. They should be in the back or should be under the display or shouldn't exist. And you should have Face ID. And the first phone company that does a proper Face ID in this year, which is not Apple, and doesn't hopefully do it as the only choice, because choice is good, is going to win in my book. Win whatever. Win a prize from Miriam. I don't know. Win something. But they're going to win because we need it. We need it. And I hope Samsung does it or Huawei does it. I hope it's the P20 or the Galaxy S9, S9 Plus, because honestly, after living with Face ID, there's no doubt in my mind this is the future. On-demand authentication, the fact that you can give your phone to someone and they can't do anything with it. It's amazing. Because it would lock
Face
instantly.
Unlock on the View 10? Yeah, because that was a recent.
So I have, but it's like edition. It's honestly even less reliable than on the 5T. The OnePlus 5T's Face Unlock, by the way, and also the OnePlus 5 now has that feature, uses the front-facing camera, requires real light, and it doesn't work in the dark because of it. It's totally not at all like a mini Connect in your phone like Apple's doing. And it works really well on the 5T, and it's secondary authentication. It's just unlocking your phone. You can spoof it with a photo, which is nice. It's solid enough to unlock your phone. It's not solid enough to use Google Pay, of course. And to me, that's great. It's a great implementation. But I was expecting with all the brouhaha that Huawei had done around the View 10 that it would even be better and faster on the View 10, but it's actually slower and more unreliable on the View 10 so far for me. I might have to rescan my face because I'm having issues with it. What I'm talking about here, Alex, is something that's like Face ID, that does depth sensing and actually analyzes your face in 3D properly and really can be used for Android payment. So I want one of the big folks, maybe it'll be that LG V30s, you never know.
Maybe.
Somebody has to give us at Mobile Congress this year a phone that does 99% of the performance of the Face ID on an Android phone as an additional means of authentication that's continuous authentication that can be used with Google Pay. That's what I'm expecting. When I talk about Face ID on an Android phone, that's what I'm talking about. Not this fake OnePlus 5T blah 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 V10 stuff.
See, you're almost there with Fake ID. Surely that's the
Fake ID. There you go.
Name.
That's a good one.
My money would be Google, honestly, to do that. I think
on the Pixel 2,
it's a Pixel 3. It's a computational problem. We all know, Google's imaging chops around that area. My money would be on them either to replicate it.
Huawei has been going on about it for didn't they show that? You remember that front of a phone, of a theoretical phone they showed with like 1 million sensors on one of the slide decks? Maybe it was on a video they showed at CES.
It was a plug-in module, I think, for the View 10. Which weird. I don't know why you do that and not just put it in a phone, but whatever.
Anyway, the point is, I think Huawei is working on something. Whether we're going to see it on the P20
I think a lot
or
of
not,
people are working on it.
Whether we see it on the P20 or not, I don't know. If Samsung's working on something, it better be way better than the stupid iris scanning that doesn't work at all for me from the S8 and Note 8.
Yeah, a situation last year was weird where you had the iris scanning that wouldn't work outside and the face unlock that wouldn't work in the dark, and it was and you could only use one. It was kind of stupid.
Nightmare. No, look, I stopped using them. If it's unreliable, I'm going to stop using it. Like the View 10 is borderline unreliable, that face. I'm not going to use it unless I'm going to rescan my face, try it one more time, and if it doesn't work, forget it. The 5T, it works. It's not secure, I accept that, but it works.
For sure. Yeah, I'm sure Huawei is working on it, and I think... maybe the reason that rumored notch is at the top of the P20 Pro is that they have something a little bit similar lurking in there.
But it's interesting. I like your point bringing up Pixel 3 and Google as a potential. I didn't think we'd have to wait that late into the year, but we might get it. And that would be lovely. I'm all for it.
The other possibility is HTC, and we have those pictures of the Imagine, the rumored U12 that came out, and what was across the top of the screen on that device?
A whole bunch of cameras.
A whole bunch of tape, and it was covering something up. So
cameras, I'm telling you, cameras, sensors, lasers, freaking lasers. We need to wrap it up. A couple of things I wanted to bring up really quickly. I will put links in the show notes, but I have been writing some stories for Pocket now. I'm going to be helping them at Mobile World Congress, even though I'm still going primarily for my podcast. So just be aware, just click on the link in the show notes. You'll see I wrote a few like mini reviews, one for the Cat S41, which is a rugged phone from Bullet, the British manufacturer. And I reviewed the Mi Sphere camera from Xiaomi. And I reviewed kind of a meh, but really beautiful wireless charger for Android and iPhone called from a company called Bezalel. I don't know if you've heard of them, but anyway, check it out. And that's basically the show. Alex, do you want to tell people where they can find you on the internets?
Absolutely. You can find me primarily at androidcentral.com and on the tubes at youtube.com/androidcentral. Also follow my personal stuff on Twitter at Alex Dobie, also on other things like Instagram, also at Alex Dobie.
Wow, you've heard that. Like that's, Alex has been, you've been at Android Central for quite a while now. How long has it been?
Oh God, like 7 years.
You can't remember. 7 years. Wow. Yeah,
in varying capacities. Yeah,
exactly. And so, and now you do a lot of video work, correct?
Yeah, so I'm basically the main video person now at AC. So the aim there is to put out as much stuff as we do on all the key topics that we hit on the site, and yeah, like just build that up and create the best stuff we possibly can.
It's good stuff. Yeah. That's why definitely check out Android Central's YouTube channel. Right? Like there's lots of stuff there. You can get to it from the stories, but I find that I'm really like to kind of binge on YouTube, and Android Central's a good one. So there you go.
Sure is. I hear it's pretty good.
I hear it's pretty good. I love how she said that. It's hilarious. Okay. You guys know where to find me at TNKGRL on Twitter. That's Tankerl without the vowel, like the comic book character. And of course, if you want to tell your friends about this podcast and you don't exactly know how they can subscribe, we're on iTunes, we're on Pocket Cast, but just if you forget all things, just Mobile Tech Podcast, it's the name of the podcast.com. Go there and it will resolve to another URL that will give you access to the RSS feed, because magically podcasts, that's how they work. It's RSS based. You grab that RSS feed link, you put that in any podcast player app, and boom, magically you're subscribed. That's how it works. And then don't forget to subscribe to the podcast if you're listening the first time. And then go to my YouTube channels. That's youtube.com/Miriam Jouar. It's my full name spelt out, Miriam with a Y. And you'll find some videos there that are kind of complementary to this podcast that show you the phones that I'm playing with. A lot of it is unboxing. Some of them are hands-on. Sometimes I do a review if I have time. And that's where you'll see, for example, that Honor View 10 hands-on that I did in November. So that's it. Stay tuned for next week. We'll have another show. And then, of course, 2 weeks from now, we'll be at Mobile World Congress. And maybe I'll have Alex on the show again. Because you know what, Alex? We're going to have a whole bunch of people on the podcast like I did at CS, where I just assembled a bunch of people in a room and we went mad for a while. It was great.
It's going to be crazy.
Indeed. Well, thanks for being on, Alex. A pleasure.
Well, thanks for having me. Finally got around to making it happen.
I'm glad we could make it work. I really appreciate that you were able to do on short notice. That was great.
Absolutely.
All right. Catch you all next week. Cheers.
This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tank Girl, Miriam Jouar.